Hi, welcome to the Embodied Woman, a home for the authentic creative. And this is a very special episode because, as you might be able to tell, this is my mom. If you're looking at the YouTube version, because I think we'll probably post this. We'll see. Maybe we won't. But if you can see us, you'll see, and maybe even hearing us, you'll see that I'm definitely my mother's daughter. And she's looking lovely today. Thank you for being here, Mom. I know it takes a lot of courage to show up to something that you've not done before and you don't know exactly what I'm going to ask you. And, you know, I think sometimes it can be sort of vulnerable for both of us to
Right.
have this type of a conversation.
Yeah.
But I am very excited to read your bio, which I'm just going to pull up here. Okay, so here we go. So Christine Fead grew up seeking spirituality and peace at a young age. In the early 1970s, when young men were drafted into the Vietnam War and returned in body bags, she became disillusioned with what she had learned and spent her Sunday mornings in nature. She started practicing yoga, being vegetarian, and was introduced to Sikhism. She joined a 3HO Foundation ashram where the disciplined lifestyle of yoga and meditation set the tone every day. She met her first husband, my dad, married, and had her daughter, me, there, but found there was no place for her own thoughts and her own voice. So after moving to Vermont, they soon found they wanted separate lives, and as a single mom, she returned to college in the evenings and weekends. Christine discovered the AST training, now called Landmark Education, and met her current husband of 38 years in a seminar. That experience gave her the tools for viewing herself as the author of her own life. She gave birth to a son and decided to put her business experience and degree to use by opening a consulting business. Having chronic, debilitating migraines made it nearly impossible to run a functional household and be the mother that she wanted to be and run a business. Having enrolled her son in the Waldorf school, she began taking adult classes in Rudolf Steiner's philosophy, introducing her to reincarnation, cosmology, and human development, and facilitated her curiosity about why we are here and how to make a difference. She found a migraine specialist to alleviate her pain and improve her quality of life. A friend recommended Reiki, which began her energy healing journey for herself and others. While teaching Reiki, she noticed her own awareness of energy increased, seeing things that she couldn't explain. And when a clairvoyant healer came to Vermont, teaching a class on energy, she enrolled in his 2-year healer's apprenticeship. She opened her own healing center where she developed a full 3-year clairvoyant and healing program, offering healing clinics and readings. One morning, years later, she realized she could not use her left leg and discovered she had had a stroke. After a year, she recovered full use of her leg and decided with her husband to close her center and moved west to be closer to her grown children and grandchildren. She studies history and its patterns, using her voice within our representative democracy to address issues like Pentagon spending billions in war readiness, but not on sex trafficking prevention. She lobbies with the Quakers in Washington, D.C., and statewide Zoom calls, visiting her members of Congress, regularly writing letters to the editor, and seeing turning points where choices being made impact the state of the world. Her passion for her passion for preserving, also persevering, but for preserving participatory democracy is what motivates her in these troubled times. So, welcome, Mom. What an incredible life you've had. What an arc you've had going from where you began to, and I'll let you, talk about your beginnings, to where you've come to now with making a difference in the world and using your voice so clearly.
Thank you, Siri.
You're welcome.
It's been quite a journey.
Yes. So I want to start at the beginning because I want to hear your story from your perspective. So I'm just curious about like what was the initial catalyst? You talked about it in your bio a little bit, but you can share what you said in your bio or anything that comes up in this moment for you that just pops into your head. Like what was the beginning, one of the beginning, because I know there's so many catalysts in your childhood that like kind of brought you to, you talked about the Vietnam War. Was that the main thing? Were there other pieces that just like made you kind of question the world and want to seek deeper?
Well, when I was quite young, we watched the news on TV every night, and TVs hadn't been around that long. I'm 70 years old. So anyway,
Congratulations. Happy birthday. Recently turning 70. It's
thank you.
perfect that we're doing this like in your beginnings of your 70th year.
Yeah. So, it became very apparent. And my mother worked, and we had a lady who came all the way across town. She was a Black lady who would come and help um, take care of us as kids. We'd come home for lunch and she would feed us and things like that. And she was from Chicago, and she wanted to listen to the news on the radio during lunchtime. So there was this broadcast called Paul Harvey, and he would talk about, a lot of the racial strife. And in my household growing up, my father was quite bigoted. He
Mm,
had come from the kind of background where he just was very threatened by people.
mm,
Um, and my mother was not that way. So there were a lot of disconnects, I want to say, with how I felt inside and what I was witnessing going
mm,
on in the world. And, I made an ignorant remark, and it made me realize how much I didn't know because
mm,
the way our housekeeper had reacted to what I had said. And so it was the beginning of really trying to understand, because I've been empathic my whole life. I pick up people's energy. I feel things.
yeah.
So I was feeling all the pain that was going on in the world and all the disharmony and um, things that were broken. And,
Mm,
my whole generation was really looking at how they could shift it, how they could change that. And, so the whole, um, flower power hippie age and the resistance to the Vietnam War
mm.
was rooted in that period of time. And it went on from there. And I was very influenced by my Catholic upbringing as well. I went
Yeah, I'm curious how that influenced you in good and challenging ways.
Yeah. Well, my mother was very religious. She lost her mother at a young age and ended up being in a Catholic orphanage run by nuns for quite a few years when she was growing up. So she was deeply, devoted to that spiritual path. But and so I was introduced that way. We lived only like a block from the neighborhood church. And so on Saturday mornings, if they were having a funeral or something, because I was in the choir and I lived so close, my mom would get a call from the parish priest and say, can you come, can she come and sing for this funeral that isn't well attended?
Wow.
So I would, get dressed and go down to church and help carry the songs for, funerals and things like that. So our family was quite close to the pastor, and I went to the parochial school that went through grades 1 through 8, and then went on to, 4 years of Catholic high school. Um, there was a busing program from kids all over the city.
Did
So,
you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just am curious. Did you feel like everything you were learning made complete sense? Did it all resonate? Or were you like, wait a minute, some of this doesn't make sense? Or how was that for you?
well, that was a process, early on. It fed something that I was really, yearning for. And even in church, like I would sit and whatever priest was giving the
Sermon.
sermon, yeah, I could sometimes see like an aura around the priest's head. And then oftentimes, if it was a visiting priest or something like that, or if the priest was kind of a grumpy person, there was no emanation around them. And I was always fascinated by what makes some of them have it and some of them not. That's as a young child.
Wow.
As I grew older,
Could you see colors? Or
not
just like
so,
like a clear energy field?
it was like golden.
Okay.
Yep. And it didn't always happen. So it wasn't just, the light or something like that. Um, but I resonated, with studying the Gospels and all that stuff that was being, and saints. And my mother had bought this series of stories that would come in installments about saints and you know um, exemplary lives.
Okay.
And so I was inspired by that, and it was something that I loved to read, and I was allowed to read those things. And so that was, um,
What were you were not allowed to read other things?
oh, my father was really of the mind that if you weren't busy doing something, you weren't doing anything worthwhile. So, he was not a big reader, and they read the newspaper every day, but, they didn't sit around reading books. So it was just it was that sort of thing. But this is when I was young in grade school.
Okay.
And when I got to high school, I started questioning a lot more, because you have more of your mental awareness starts to expand, and you start to see more and put them in a context. And I had a wonderful aunt, as you know, that I could talk to about these things. So it really helped me to process and facilitate understanding who my parents were. And having a mentor like that can make such a huge difference in a young person's life, um, to really
Because
give,
she had a safe space for you and a perspective where you could question things.
right, exactly. And I could ask her things that I couldn't ask my parents. It would just set my parents off if I asked them certain things, or they would give me very curt answers because they felt threatened by being questioned. But my aunt, was very open-minded. She was a businesswoman. She never married, so she was very independent, and she gave us a lot of time when she was able to have special time to do things.
Yeah, and like she was also really playful and
Yes,
silly and like would laugh all the time, right? So that was probably nice for you.
it was a welcome treat. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so we were just talking about like your questioning of Catholicism.
Yeah. So, by the time I mean, even in high school, I think I remember being interviewed in my junior year by one of the priests. It was that time where we had a few nuns that were teachers, but mostly it was lay people at this point. And there was one nun that taught African history, Black history. So it was an innovative time, and we had, uh, a very integrated population in our high school. So it was really a good,
Columbus, Ohio, right?
yeah, Columbus, Ohio was a good integration of really understanding people that didn't look like me, or people that, you know, um, from different socioeconomic backgrounds as well.
Hmm.
So in that regard, and in the quality of education I got, I was really pleased with that, even as an adult now. But you know, starting to question, what we were being told and taught in various ways. And then by the time I was a senior, I was really it was kind of a pivotal year for me. And I was really becoming quite what do I want to say? Just disillusioned. I guess that's the best word. And
Hmm.
waking up to, well, these people aren't really doing, and it was a time where there were protests going um, um, on campus downtown, and our bus driver was a policeman, and he was saying that warning us not to go downtown and get involved in that, because they were tear gassing kids and all of that. And this is when Kent State
Hmm.
killings happened, with the clash between the students and the National Guard. And so there was a lot of that being publicized on TV, and I was really um, trying to figure out how I, as a young 18-year-old girl, could do something about what was happening.
Were you questioning all authority at
Yeah,
that point?
yeah,
Yeah.
that was kind of like, that was what I was being, just in one's maturation process. I think that happens anyway.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. But it was also the times that we were living in were very intense.
Mm,
Um, and I would say the generation that's growing up now is going through their own version of that, and it's even
right.
more complex than it was. Now there's a whole political thing about one's sexuality and all of that, young people are having to grapple with,
Hmm.
and finding acceptance one way or the other of what they're going through. So, um, yeah, finding your own voice can be very difficult when you've been in an environment where you have been told what you should think or what you should feel, and you don't have a lot of permission to use your voice, to speak up and ask questions. And,
Yeah, and you're not taught how to think for yourself. And my generation wasn't really taught that either.
right, right.
It's only more now.
Well, it's a lot easier for adults and parents and school teachers if you're not, if the students aren't bucking you every step of the way. So it's become an extreme. I know school teachers now are having a lot of difficulty, you know, um, really feeling safe in their own classrooms,
Mm,
and that safety can be a very traumatic thing for anyone who's dedicated to teaching children. I really feel that
yes.
both the job of parents and the job of teachers are one of the most critical um, jobs that exist right now, and probably have for a long, long time. But we don't value that as a society very
That's
much.
right. That's right. Yep.
So, we have
The
to,
hardest job, but the least appreciated.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
And the, no pay or very low pay, and, very,
Yeah.
very few privileges, or really support, the kind of support that parents, and, now we have things like family leave, and, that businesses are starting to grant, new parents.
Right. Yeah,
fluid
that's an
information.
improvement for sure.
Yes.
So I'm interested to get into the catalyst that brought you to, like, was there a defining moment that you can remember, or was it a series of small moments that brought you into making that decision, like, I'm going to put on a turban?
Oh, that. Yeah. Well, that was a gradual process. It was, so I went from, going to church every Sunday with my parents, and then one day I just was looking around and it was all about what people were wearing. People were judging people that were standing in line to go up for communion. And I was like, this is ridiculous, um, this isn't, Christianity as I've been taught it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Right.
And following that golden rule is still something I find of of deep value. But I went from that to, going to college for a while. My college education was kind of broken up for a number of reasons, but um then
Yeah, I know I skipped over college, but I feel like, well, maybe I don't know. Was there a huge, like, potent learning lesson that came out of your college experience?
well, there was a lot of loneliness. I went to a college. It wasn't far from home. I had initially chosen that as a way to go. I, my senior year, I had a boyfriend and I wanted to be able to be, close to come back home and visit and everything. But I had trouble making friends. Um, I was kind of shy and didn't find a lot of commonality in the dorm that I um, was in. I
Yeah,
wanted to be in the hippie dorm where they were smoking pot and doing what looked like a lot of fun stuff. But I ended up in a different dorm that had a curfew and things like that. So, there was a layer of protection that we're trying to do, but that my parents were trying to do. But it was just that I didn't really connect with some
mm,
of the girls, and I had a very incredibly shy roommate that that was she was a farmer's daughter. So she was even quieter than I was.
right.
So
So you felt isolated during
I felt very,
college.
very isolated, and I was not near the boyfriend that I had at the time, and that was really very difficult for me as well. He came one weekend, he traveled on the bus or something, so you couldn't have a car on campus, and so you were kind of at the mercy of trying to integrate, and that was challenging for me. I
Yeah.
did drop out, and then started my work life at home. You know, all kinds of different jobs, really, trying to understand who I am and what I'm about and what's important to me, but really just sort of getting my feet on the ground and getting a sense of who I was and earning some money.
Yeah. Like
So
feeling more independent and self-sufficient and
exactly.
all of that outside of what your parents were dictating.
Right.
And
And finding a girlfriend that I could have an apartment with, and we started doing things like going to the yoga classes, and that was another turning point. Going to the yoga classes and attending things that were on campus, that where there were a lot more opportunities to learn about Eastern philosophy, and there was a guy that was talking about, vegetarianism and different different kinds of things. And the yoga classes were at one of the ashrams that I eventually joined.
do
So
you feel like you were always a seeker?
yes,
Yeah.
looking for, it was just like a deep calling inside of me, urging me on to find deeper meaning, to find something authentic and real. And you know, that calling, I think it's, when you're an old soul, sometimes you have these um things that you want to do as much as you can to learn about people and have experiences that help you understand life and allow you to um, develop your own wisdom.
Yeah.
And I was much more interested in doing that um, earlier than the average person, I would say.
Hmm.
So, you know, so then I joined the ashram, and it was a very safe environment, than
Wait,
many other.
I just want to back up. So you started going to the yoga classes on campus and you
Yeah.
started hearing about vegetarianism. And so was it like this gradual process of going to more and more and more of the yoga classes and then feeling like you just wanted to keep leaning into that?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
I wanted to do something differently than what my parents' path had been. I
Okay.
had already experienced that path, and I wasn't finding what I was looking for in that. So even in college, before, I got to the ashram, I would go to different churches and check out what they were talking about. And I had one girlfriend um, in my dorm that was a Christian Scientist, and I'm like, well, I'd like to come with you. So, I found out later that my mother-in-law's mother, her mother, had been a Christian Scientist. So it was kind of interesting to have a little bit more background. And then, in the ashram, I started learning about Sikhism because, after yoga class, after meditation, you'd kind of do a relaxation period and there'd be a little talk,
So
about.
where was this first ashram that you went to?
It was in Columbus where I grew up. Yeah. And
Okay.
it was downtown, it was close to campus.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, they would have regular yoga classes and or, you know, things that were for the community. So, we attended things like that.
Yeah. And then what was that transition from being visiting that ashram to then like, oh, I want to live in a commune here and be here full time and then like transferring to where you were?
Right.
Like, what was that?
Right. There was every quarter there was a gathering, a national gathering of in 3HO Foundation. 3HO just means healthy, happy, holy organization, and they would have um either on the equinox or the solstice, have a gathering where Yogi Bhajan would come and you would do what was called tantric yoga. It was white tantric, and it was supposed to help cleanse your consciousness of, old stuff and karma and whatnot. And I thought, well, let's go experience that. And so I went with people from the ashram, and it was, very intense. So, I was attracted to finding out more and experiencing more, and what, having a communal life would be like. And the explanation being that communal life brings up stuff faster. Being in relationship with anyone makes
Yeah.
things bubble up to the surface for you to be able to,
Like
become aware.
polish your life when there's they say in Buddhism like it's like when the potatoes rub up against each other it polish, it's
Polish
yes.
the rough edges. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yes. So, being in a household with many people in it, that makes it's like a pressure cooker.
Right. And everyone's doing their own personal transformation process, which is like they're going through their own stuff so quickly and then with each other too. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And bear in mind too that, early 20s. So I was 20 years old when I joined the ashram. And I had friends who were going like, oh, you're 20, you should be out dancing in the streets. And I'm like, I'm not interested in doing that. You know,
Yeah.
they were experimenting with drugs and things like that, and I just didn't want to do that. So that's when I said it was a safe place where I wasn't getting myself into areas where it could have been really potentially dangerous, for me as an individual and as a young woman.
Do you feel like you were seeking safety and belonging? Or do you feel like, I mean, it sounds like that's what you're saying. Or do you feel like there was this deep, maybe it's both, like call to this like higher consciousness?
Yep, it was both. It was definitely both. And, I think that group settings, working in groups, I feel this even now, as my own awareness has evolved, that working in groups is a great way for you to begin to see how other people see you.
Mm.
We
Like
tend,
use them as a mirror.
exactly, we tend not to see ourselves clearly. And when you're working in any kind of group environment, although it can be contentious, and you have to learn how to work with others who think differently than you, who you may not agree with, but that really is a source of growth and maturation as well, to really begin to understand who you really are and what you bring to the table that others are not able to bring. So I
Hmm.
think valuing that and learning how to value that is one of the most important things, particularly women um, need to be able to cultivate inside themselves and appreciate.
Hmm.
I thought, well, nobody's ever really wanted to know what I think or how how I feel or what my experiences are. So I'll just be quiet. But that doesn't really buy anything or move anything out here on the earth plane, that we're trying to make a difference in all the things that are going on in the world. So you can sit and meditate for hours. Um, it might make you feel happier in one sense, but then how much is that actually, um, to me, having your actions follow what you are about is
Yes.
really one of the most important things um, for a human to be able to realize that their wisdom comes with a responsibility
Hmm.
to, do what they can while you're in a body.
Yeah. So I think what's so beautiful is when we use the ability to use practices like you've learned your whole life and integrate those like you're doing, like you've done, to
Yes,
bring you to those places of right action,
yes,
of right wisdom. And when we have those practices of communing and knowing how to connect with our voice and our deepest wisdom and our highest self into the collective, then we know what actions to take.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And, I think it was Margaret Mead that said, any small group of people that are dedicated to making a difference, they're the ones that actually move things forward. And that's the only thing that's ever really made a difference is people working in groups and people being willing to cooperate with each other,
Mhm.
particularly people that don't agree. It
Mm.
that can be the most challenging,
Right.
where
Yeah.
where there's conflict, about resources, about values, how can you still, and this is what I do with the Congress people that I meet with, is, oftentimes you'll not be able to meet directly with your congressperson, but you'll meet with a staff person. And, because they're kind of the boots on the ground people that are running around doing everything that needs to be done to support that congressperson. But then, you're the constituent. They're the ones that are working on your behalf, and you're the one that voted for them. So, they give us a voice. And we have the privilege of living in a democracy, and in many places in the world, they don't have that.
Mhm.
And I want to preserve that because it's such an important um, form of being able to self-govern and not have dictatorships where, you're being told what to do, when to do, and it's just somebody else's whim and not the wisdom of the collective, being able to have everybody's needs met.
Mhm.
And that's not an easy thing to do.
You've you have um, this common theme really seeking, of really seeing what others don't necessarily all see, and of like pioneering. You know, you were one of the first people to start to do Reiki before Reiki became popular.
Right.
You know, so like, okay, so you were in the ashram, and I want to bring us through because I love that you're sprinkling in everything that you're for now in this world. I'm so thankful you're doing that. And I also want to make sure we touch upon back to your life. So, um, what do you feel like was the overarching, now looking back? And I know they keep coming, the lessons, but like, what was maybe one of the overarching lessons of the ashram for you?
Being true to myself.
Okay.
There's a balance between, inner and outer. There's, between self and the whole. And there are all these dichotomies we're always trying to balance both within ourselves and in our world. And that includes, the environment that we live in. And so that's taking care of the earth as well. But, that balance is something you have to experience in order to develop some level of mastery. Um, you know, Even as a kid, we'll eat the things we love the most to the point where we make ourselves, not feel well, like, um, and then you learn out of loving yourself that, oh, I feel better if I don't eat quite so much of that. And, like figuring out what your instinct is or what you're drawn to, and then sort of parenting yourself in learning good balance on all
Mm.
levels.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like interesting because the ashram was sort of an extreme
Yes.
of trying to do all the most enlightened things, but
Mhm.
to the point of imbalance.
Right, because the collective was so um enforced in a way, that you didn't have the opportunity to make your own mistakes and then learn from that.
Yeah.
And use your own mental capabilities to question things and to understand, the importance of having your own experiences as an individual. So there's a balance between, individual consciousness and group consciousness. And you can't have one without the other. Nobody is totally isolated. We live in a society, and we have to learn to take care of ourselves and be responsible for ourselves, but also to care for others. And that balance is not an easy thing to learn. It doesn't happen overnight. Um, all these decisions that get made for you, might be a good starting place. In some ways, it was safe for me to have those boundaries, set up. But then, I mean, we even had boundaries around how often we were supposed to um, be intimate with our spouse. So
Mm.
it was like, wow, this is just too much. It was
Right.
beginning to be
There's not enough, no free will.
no free will,
Yeah.
and really beginning to understand as we were getting older too, becoming adults, by the time, because your dad and I left when we were around, I was, I think, 28.
Mhm.
I don't remember how old he was. He must have been in his early 30s at that point. So, it was time for us to kind of step out and find our own way.
And then you were seeking, continuing to seek, as always, what else can I learn? What other perspectives can I learn? How can I be in groups? How can I make my life better and other lives better through these groups? And you found AST.
Yes, and I think it's natural for people to want to find other like-minded people as themselves,
Yeah,
and
like tribe.
yeah, to work in community. And S did that, especially, well, it's called Landmark now, but their ongoing seminars were really, a place where many people in the area that I lived in were attending, and really had that kind of overarching um, drive to want to make a difference in the world. And so that philosophy was very appealing. It was very mental. It wasn't necessarily heart-centered. Um, you know, um, there were people who were heart-centered within it, but um, the overarching philosophy of it was, um, share it with your friends, bring in as many people as you can, and they relied heavily on volunteerism. And that's where, I met my current husband, Sandy, and um, we volunteered quite a bit and learned a lot. I really, I've had some amazing teachers along the way, and I'm incredibly grateful to those people who mentored me, taught me things, you know, kicked me in the backside when I needed that, and inspired me, all those um, different influences along the way has helped shaped who I am today.
The other thing I'm noticing is your level of dedication to whatever you've chosen
Yes.
is 100%.
Well, why not? It's like if you're going to try something and you really it rings true for me. Whenever I've um been searching and something rang very true and appealed to that calling deep inside of me, then yes, I wanted to pursue it. I wanted to, um, be dedicated and learn as much as I possibly could from that resource, and give as much as I possibly could to give back.
Yeah, I feel like you have this incredible actually work ethic and that maybe was instilled in you from your dad. I don't know.
And my mom, yeah,
And
both
your
of them.
mom.
Yeah,
Um, and that was very important. So whatever you were seeking, you really wanted to give everything, your whole life to that thing.
yeah,
And then having these debilitating migraines,
yeah,
uh, that must have been so crushing, not only physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, but like crushing in the sense that you love to give all of yourself.
yes, yeah. Well, it was, I don't, pain can be the great leveler, and you learn things from that as well. But it was really thwarted a lot of the things that I had, a lot of my intentions. And so that was frustrating and painful, another level of pain that brought in, just physically not being able to do the things that I really wanted to be doing.
Yeah.
And
So here's a question for you, Mom. What would you have? What's the like alternate version of Christine? Like if you didn't have those migraines all those years, what do you feel like you would have been able to experience or to dedicate yourself to? Like what's the version where you're like, oh, I wish I could have been doing this, this, and this?
I think I probably would have continued with my business. I was able to help my husband Sandy start his own law firm, later on, and
Yeah.
that was, after the migraines had pretty much gone at that point. But my migraines were hormonal, and so once I got through menopause, and then that really took care of itself, and which was, you know, like a veil being lifted off, and being able to have that energy to do something that I really wanted to do. And that's when I started my healing center.
Yeah.
Um, but, the migraines brought me to Reiki. And,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so everything, even the very big challenges,
Yep.
have been a stepping stone toward something that I feel like I was meant to lean into.
Yeah, turning your pain into your purpose, and your
Yes.
purpose then became helping others to heal and to be able to see what they see. And tell me
Right.
more about that, please.
Well, some of my first some of my first students were my family members. And that was interesting in and of itself, because family members usually think, well, this is my mom, she's doing this thing now. And
Yeah.
so, they don't necessarily, um they're doing it out of their relationship with you, not because they're necessarily all in themselves and want to learn. But it rubbed off, and it started to open doors, and I met a lot of people. It was incredible. I mean, there was a point where I had met a Philippine man, who was a psychic healer. He was a psychic surgeon.
Oh, yeah.
And, I hosted him um, at one point, so I met a lot of different people from many walks of
Was
life.
he connected to the John of God school of
He,
healing?
well, that was another experience that I ended up having. That was later, after I started doing my kind of clairvoyant work as well. But the Reiki was the beginning of, like, my circle of Reiki friends that were practicing, and we'd get together weekly, and just laugh and share stories about life, and um, do what we could to help other people as well as ourselves. And I have friends still, both from the ashram and from, my Reiki circle, and, people along the way. So I've made some lifelong friends in the process of all of this. Um, the the Reiki kind of led me into the clairvoyant realm, because I was experiencing things when I would give people those Reiki attunements,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they had had something traumatic happen. I could see this dark energy around them that they were really looking to release.
Yeah.
And there were times when I was like, what the heck is this?
Uh-huh.
I didn't get into this to start doing exorcisms. It was a little creepy, at times, and I didn't really know what I was dealing with or how to protect myself in the
Okay.
process of that.
Yeah.
And so when I met Michael Tamura, um, he had a lot of experience in that realm. And so I've learned, I mean, I studied with Michael for like 15 years. There was a lot of experiences, and not just in healing, but also in the learning the clairvoyant things. And I met some other women as well that were fantastic teachers, Mary Bell and Hope Hewitts. And so it was the um, incredible self-discovery as well, because you can't do that for other people unless you're also doing it for yourself and willing to, look in those dark corners where you're not, where you haven't really been able to look before, because trauma has its way of finding, places to hide out in your own body, in your own space, and in your own consciousness. And you have to be able to shine the light on them and go, hello, and
I
allow
remember
yourself-
you bringing me to several things,
Mhm,
which is great. Like I remember you bringing me to the Circle of Reiki Masters and how
mhm,
much fun that was. And that they would like Karen Krieger would say, let's go out on the back balcony and look at the fairies in the garden. And I was always like, I don't see the fairies. What are they talking about? And but she taught us how to do the tarot deck and, obviously Reiki. And then I also remember you bringing me to this woman, Claudia's house in her attic, and she would channel
mhm,
this with this voice.
mhm.
And I
Yeah,
was, I was like, what is going on? But I was also into it. I was
yeah.
like, I was kind of weirded out, but I was also like, this is interesting because she would do like, this is boy, like
Yeah.
and always like such lovely, kind, heart-centered people were in these practices that you were doing. And then you also had the at one point you started after Reiki, you kind of transitioned out of doing Reiki, was the Christ consciousness on the feet.
Uh-huh. Right.
What was
Right.
that whole journey?
Well, I had learned of that as one of the clairvoyant healings that we did, where you would just sort of really get yourself into that place of, you know, um, Christ consciousness meant, universal love. It was really not a religious thing so much as a place of being in that oneness yourself with, the healing energy that is available. And, it's the kind of healing that, you um, just total compassion.
Yeah.
And, um, running that, it was kind of a gold color energy, running it through the recipient's body. And, it's running through you as well. But because there was getting to be points where I couldn't hold some of the Reiki positions because of my back. And um, it
Hmm.
was, I was finding it physically taxing.
Right.
So doing the Christ consciousness healings just made it
Yeah,
easier.
easier. So the other thing I mean, there's just so much. I feel like we're trying to pack in way too much. But because you've had a dynamic life and you've sought so many things and you've helped in so many ways, one of the things that you innovated and pioneered as well was you and Sandy helped to create a high school for Drew's continuation of my brother Drew's continuation of the Waldorf education.
Right, right. Um, yeah, there was a very thriving grade school in Vermont, and we wanted to, a lot of the parents really wanted to continue on because it was really like kind of like the fruition, the most deep fruition of that philosophy, and being able to offer that to all these kids was really something that we wanted to do. So there was a lot of fundraising, um, you know, uh, events and things like
Mhm.
that.
So the philosophy was like education from the inside out.
Yes, and holistic education where, mind, heart, soul, that and hands, so that they really integrated the arts into the curriculum. So it wasn't like a separate topic.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, like they would do eurythmy, which was like math with by dancing, like using your body to understand math, which is so cool.
Yes. And, because everybody has a different learning style, so they were um, addressing all the various ways in which children develop and learn. And
Yeah, which is like the opposite of what you kind of experienced as growing up. It's almost like you provided your son with what you wish you had had.
right. Well, and I saw that he had that he was really bright and had a lot of potential for, being able to have that artistic levels of understanding cultural levels of things. And he was studying the cello at the time, and that really, having that cello rest against his chest, while that all that music was vibrating. And, so they brought culture into every aspect of education. And I think that those kids had a very well balanced education as a result. They're doing amazing things in the world, many of those.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So we're skipping around. One thing I just remembered that I wanted to ask you is I've been working with a few different women and lots of women over the years, but with some women recently that are in this phase of life where they have had a divorce and they have their either child or children, and they're having to navigate being a mom with children
Mhm.
or a child, and how to like take care of themselves but also like navigate that relationship with their ex-husband and
Um,
parent,
yeah.
like with very different priorities. And whereas like the husband has like one way of parenting or doesn't prioritize parenting or wants their life to be a certain way and like move everyone in a, it's like, so these women are just like so challenged.
Yeah.
So I know you have probably a whole book that you could write
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Not to say, put words in your mouth about your experience, but just if we could skip to like, what would you say to them? What are some words of wisdom you could give them or some validation or comfort?
Well, I think being authentic as much as you can. I tried very hard with you in particular, not to badmouth your father when we were going through that very difficult, challenging time.
Yeah,
I
I don't think you really,
Putting kids in the middle of that is
yeah,
completely unfair to the child. They're already struggling and feeling like it's their fault. And so trying to alleviate any of that you possibly can, and being a sounding board for however they're feeling. So I made you the priority in that. And um, then, I was doing therapy for myself and getting guidance in that, because I didn't have the life skills myself at that point
mhm,
to do it alone. It was, nobody should have to do that alone. And I really needed the support of
mhm.
how to do it responsibly, and both learning how to take care of myself and negotiating, a lot of being able to communicate cleanly um, what was going to work,
Yeah.
and when
So,
to,
yeah,
yeah,
like how do you hold your truth and hold your boundaries and like stand up for what you need in those, like, what would, yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's not easy. It's one of the biggest challenges I think parents go through. And we had a unique situation where we were co-parenting, your dad and I. So he would have you for a while and then you would come to my house. And so I think it was difficult for you to transition from one place to the other, because it was different sets of rules. And knowing, where you belong and what's allowed and what's not allowed and that sort of thing can be very confusing for a child. So to the degree that you can work some of that out and have some things in common, it's good, but never guaranteed. So, you know, you're teaching your child how to navigate the world, and that's your biggest job. That's your most important job as a parent. And you don't want to lose yourself in the process. So
Mhm.
it's again another balancing act, and it takes some mastery to keep doing that every day. It's impossible in many ways. It's
Yeah, some say there is no such thing as balance.
yeah,
So,
finding, kind of continuing to check in with yourself. What do I need today?
mhm,
What's the one thing I can do for myself at the end of this long day when I finally get my kid in bed? And, whether it's taking a nice soaking bath or reading your favorite book or watching a TV show that you find fun, or talking having a girlfriend or somebody that you really trust that you can talk to, but then
mhm.
having somebody who's impartial, like a professional therapist, that can help you kind of navigate your own um, emotional spaces that it inevitably brings up inside of you. You know, you're always going to have those children in common.
Yep.
And the thing to remember is that staying in communication is not for you necessarily, it's for that child and the
Mhm,
love you have for that child.
mhm.
So, you do make sacrifices. It's it's just part of the joy of being a parent, is making sacrifices and learning that sometimes that's more important. But, this is where not leaving yourself out of that formula is also important.
What would you tell yourself? And maybe you've already said it, but what would you tell yourself now, like with everything you know now, as the beautiful 70 years young, experienced woman that you are, what would your 70-year-old self tell the woman who, before she met Sandy,
Mhm.
what would you tell her about parenting and working those things out with the ex-husband?
Well, that it's a lifelong relationship. You may not be living under the same roof, and you may not have to have daily interactions, but the partnership is still possible to have as a co-parent.
Mhm,
And you may not agree.
mhm.
Most likely you won't agree on many, many things. That's
Yeah,
probably why, but you're learning how to speak your truth with compassion.
right, right.
Speak your truth with compassion because they're going through something as well.
Yes,
And it's never one or the other is going to be right all of the time. That
right.
you have to be able to speak to who you know that person to be. There was
Mm,
something that attracted you to that person to begin with that you really valued,
mm,
or you wouldn't have had a child with them.
right.
So being able to see that even when they're behaving so differently than that.
Mm,
In the Steiner philosophy, they call that the word faithfulness. It's like being faithful to who you know they actually are, the
mm,
person that you know them to be deep inside. And that may be covered up with a lot of weird behaviors. When people get divorced, it's I think they're titles of books called Crazy Town or something like that. It's just,
mhm,
it brings out some of the worst behaviors in people towards each other because they're hurting, and they're really in a lot of um, disruption,
Mm.
and it's a level of trauma. And depending on what you went through in the marriage, can be more extreme in some cases. So, being able to know who they are and know too if you can't trust them.
Mm.
It's like, and then being, you know, trying to figure out how to deal with that. So it's
It
not
seems like it must be one of the most challenging things to try to navigate is being a good parent and navigate an ex relationship and parent with that ex relationship. Like,
right.
just
If
seems like,
it's if it's possible, and sometimes it's not possible, Siri. Sometimes that person is just not a reliable parent.
hmm,
And you have to know enough about them to be able to trust that. I knew your dad was a good person inside and that he would take good care of you when you were with him.
hmm,
So I had that as a foundation. There are times when people separate for reasons that, maybe somebody's, into drugs or whatever it is that they're dealing with, and
right, like alcoholism or
addictions and things.
abuse or yeah,
Yeah. Where, the partner's not just not trustworthy.
yeah,
And then you have to be able to make tough decisions around that.
yeah.
So it's really like what's in the best interest of your child, and putting their, because they don't have a voice, often, and being able to look at things from their perspective. And
Thank you. I want to make sure we have time for where, well, any pieces between where we left off with the healing world. And, you started a clairvoyant school, like a brick and mortar you had for how long? Was that 3, 4, 5 years? How long?
oh no, I actually started that out of my house, and then I had an actual public office where people could come, and um, that was about 15 years actually, the whole
Oh,
from the
wow.
beginning beginning to the end, and so it was a lot of working with the public and setting it up in ways that worked for me so that I could sustain it for that long,
Right.
and take care of my own energy level and everything. And I had people that were helping me, but it's a real commitment. I'm thrilled that I did that. I got a lot of pleasure out of watching people grow and benefit from what I was teaching them and the mentoring that I was doing with them. I started to see towards the end that I wanted to transition into people taking leadership roles. So the last year that I taught, I came up with a whole curriculum about leadership,
Hmm.
like what held people back from thinking that they could be a leader in some regards or making some contribution to society. That's when I began the um, it's called FCNL advocacy team in Vermont before we moved. FCNL stands for Friends Committee on National Legislation. And now the Quakers work with people with the understanding that there's God in everyone,
Mm-hmm.
even the people that you don't agree with or that you don't like very much, their um, um,
Yep.
way they operate. So, learning to and there was a whole training with it, and so I was incorporating some of that training into my leadership program, and then getting that FCNL off the ground as an action team in Vermont before we left, and that's still going on. And
Amazing.
that's a national movement, which I highly recommend. If it's just been a valuable learning tool for me to take. They focus on one um, facet for the year. Like this year, it's on Pentagon spending. And, the Pentagon never gets audited. They just seem to have a carte blanche, for whatever it is they want to, um, spend money on, and, to the detriment of some of the social programs that really need to be taken care of and looked at, and some of the issues. So learning how to take those steps in, really valuing, you know, being in a democracy, living in a democracy, and, wanting your voice to be heard in such a way that you can have an influence on your representative. And that's, the beauty of living in this country that we live in, that we're privileged to live in.
What are some of the other themes or topics that you guys have worked on over the years?
Um, One was, prison, reform,
Okay.
and, people just being thrown in for having, marijuana on their person, people being stuck in that system, um,
Yeah.
that were innocent, things like that. So,
Mhm.
the unfairness, and how, the US has more people in prison than all the other countries on the planet combined.
Right.
It's,
So something's broken.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And looking at, various topics like that. Sometimes it'll be on peace, sometimes it will be on, social justice. Um, but we pick a the Quakers themselves choose, what the topic is, and
And
I
you
always
lobby together. You go to
lobby
DC.
together
Uh-huh.
as a team. So you're never alone in any of that. You can take those steps and get that training, and, do it as a group. And now that, Zoom is popular and it saves lots of time and travel and things like that, we do like statewide Zooms where we, visit one of our representatives and present, in a very, uh, quick, like usually they don't have that much time, so you have to be organized ahead of time. So there's a whole format that we use, and to
Have you
present.
been able to see some progress from that at any point? Did anything come
Yeah,
to fruition? What happened?
well, at one point, different legislation, and it's a long game, so you don't, you,
Yeah.
you
It's
can't go in and
government is slow.
and, having influence and getting people moving towards, solutions, is it's also, and not play politics. So, having bipartisan kinds of, solutions to things is always a challenge, but, getting your voice heard, and
But you
some,
said you've seen progress.
yeah, there was a point early on when I first started this where we were talking about the Iran deal, and we actually saw that come to pass before it got shot down, but it did, live for a while as a, international cooperative. Um, and we had great hope around that, but as I said, it's a long game, things like, gun safety,
Mm.
and things like that. So there are many issues that they work on, and people can choose, whatever they, are passionate about.
Okay.
But you learn how to speak respectfully to these
Mm.
people who are trying to do a job,
Hmm.
and just, mouthing off at them doesn't really, make them want to work with you. And you
Right.
develop a relationship that's positive and respectful, and you keep presenting your point, because they're supposed to represent you even if they're not, of the affiliation that you, associate with.
Yes.
So, getting your voice heard, and, there are various ways of doing that.
So if someone's interested in that, is there a website they can go to that I can put in the show notes?
Yeah, it's fcnl.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you also are part of a group that you can tell us a little bit about, or
Um, Well, there's a website called Peaceful Advocacy that envelops a couple of different nonprofit groups that we work with, and including just donating blood to the Red Cross. You know, they're always looking for donors because of, you know, there's so many crises going on in the world,
Hmm.
and weather related type of crises that happen as well, where people um, are injured, or, you know, and so it's a simple thing that you can do. And there's a theory that when you give blood, you actually kind of delete some of your karma.
Oh, interesting.
If
I
you've
didn't
ever,
hear that before.
yeah, if you've ever done harm to a person, and maybe in a past life or something, by donating blood, you're kind of helping to pay that debt off in a way, you know, because you're giving blood is like life.
Hmm.
So,
It's
you
a
know,
cause. It's a
yeah,
deep cause.
yeah.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
know, I've had friends that have worked for Doctors Without Borders and things like that. There are plenty of, this is what gives me hope, is there are lots of really amazing, brave, and generous people in the world that are doing good work. We
Hmm.
don't always hear about them,
Hmm.
but they're out there.
Yeah.
And was it Mr. Rogers that
The
said,
helpers.
you look for the helper?
Look for the helpers.
And I try to be a helper in the ways
Yes.
that I can, you know, contribute it to, you know, the food banks and homeless centers and things like that, where you know there's a real deep need
Well,
to
I
help.
know that Jake and I give to Meals on Wheels every month because of your influence. And speaking of your influence, I just want to say so much of what I've become interested in, the work that I do, learning to give in the ways that I give to others comes from your modeling.
Oh, thank you, honey.
And you being a pioneer is a theme. And that's something that I think I've also taken on as well in these modalities, like kind of being one of the first people to do certain things before it becomes like super popular. I feel like that's a theme that I learned from you or that
Mhm.
I have in common with you, why my soul chose you.
Well, you know, part of being a pioneer is educating people along the way, you know, like you're not just taking action, but you need to be able to bring people along. And
Yeah.
bringing people along means, you know, teaching them why it's important that you're doing what you're doing.
Hmm.
So, you know, being curious. I like Ted Lasso, you know, the, be curious instead of judgmental. That when you find yourself being judgmental, you're shutting down the possibility of being able to connect with people and understand where they're coming from and who they are. And the more, you know, because we all want that. We all want to be able to connect. It makes our life more rich, and it allows us to, you know, contribute the things that we have to share. And so, you know, I know that I'll never stop learning, and that's really what's exciting about being alive at this point in time.
Yeah, and that's I think also a theme, Mom, as we close up is to just say your commitment to always being someone who's evolving and always being someone who's learning
Mhm.
and then giving all of yourself to those commitments.
Thank you, Siri. Oh, it's
Yeah.
important. It's important to keep us all moving forward, and allowing this earth to be a place where, you know, human beings can thrive.
And you talked a little bit about the relationships in Vermont and, friends that you've had over the years from various things you've been dedicated to. And I know because you're not on Facebook anymore, that people reach out to me all the time
Uh-huh.
and ask me, how's your mom? And is she doing well? And I'm so grateful to her. And she did so much for me. And her and Sandy, we miss them. And, just people whose hearts are full with gratitude for what you taught them and how you brought them along and how you taught, what you taught them and how you changed their lives.
Mm.
So I think you now live here in Washington and you don't get to be reminded every day of the people that you've taught and that you've helped.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they are telling me.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you passing it along. And, I still have a lot of love for people along my journey. And, and what I want for them is for them to pay it forward, like we get mentored by amazing people and we get the opportunity to learn. If we're lucky enough to have that, there are always people there somewhere. We have to look sometimes for them. But yeah, like Mr. Rogers says, look for the helpers. And being a helper is very rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you love spending time with seeing your grandkids play. And, I have loved, it's been so deeply rewarding for me since Jake and I moved to Washington, because you showed us when we first visited, oh, this is a life that we could have.
Yes.
You showed us that, and it's been so deeply rewarding for me and for Jake and for the kids to have you and Sandy as a foundation, as friends, to share meals together, to go to Christmas things together, to just have the opportunity to, every week get together and spend time together is such a blessing. And it's so beautiful that we started together in Vermont, growing up. Well, obviously before that we were in Boston, but like really foundationally, we started all together in Vermont, and here we are, you and Sandy and me and Drew and now Jake and the kids, like all, and his wife Daphne, like all together
Yeah.
in the same area is really sweet.
Yeah, we didn't exactly plan it that way from the get-go, but it's evolved in that way. And I'm so grateful. I feel really blessed that I get to be near my family and celebrate these, things like birthdays and,
Yeah.
holidays, and be able to watch the little ones grow. I got the privilege of being at their births, for their home births, and watching them grow into their own little personalities and their own likes, and have them Phoenix comes up and says, I love you, Grammy. And, it
Mm.
just fills my heart with much joy.
Yeah, we love being able to be together, and it's very harmonious.
Yeah,
We've gone through some rocky times
yeah,
as mothers and daughters can.
yeah,
And, we've come out the other side in a very harmonious relationship.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm really grateful for the work that we've both done to get here.
yeah. Me too, Siri.
Yeah. So I love you. I appreciate you. I'm proud of you. And I love that you've, dedicated yourself so deeply in so many ways, and that you have worked and continue into your retirement to work so hard for the greater good. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, and I'm very proud of you as well. And I love you dearly. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. This was great. Thank you, Mom.
Okay.
Obviously, there's so much more we could talk about, but for today, we'll say goodbye. Thanks,
Good
guys.
night.
Bye.